we're continuing our journey into the exploration of transactional analysis using our avatars. We're going to speak about some more. If you do enjoy this podcast, it'd be great if you share that with others. Maybe give us a review on your podcasting platform. That would be great. So let's, Sarah, why don't you reintroduce us to our avatar?
Thanks, Gregor. So we're talking about a lady called Alicia. She is of Iranian descent. She's female. She's in her early 30s, and she's a finance manager. And she's really keen to get promoted up to finance director. And in terms of some of the things that we've been briefed from our HR contact, is that she's very well thought of, highly regarded, but really needs to be more visible. She doesn't like politics, wants her work to speak for itself. And so, they're really keen to promote her, but she really needs to be more visible and have more influence in the organisation, really positioning herself as a leader.
Yeah, and we find that sort of client is, we get a lot of that in terms of they think, I'm going to keep my head down, I'm going to do really good work, and because I do really good work, I should get promoted, but they don't do any work around visibility and influence or presence, and that's often when we might get brought in by HR, because you've got a good person, but they need to expand beyond where they are. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And of course, there's a whole range of different ways that a coach might work with a client that's bringing this kind of an issue, this kind of a challenge. And I guess the important thing to say here is we're not saying that what we're going to talk through today is the right approach, that there is 10 steps you must follow if you're going to use a TA kind of lens. It's just that's something you and I are both interested in, and we wanted to explore how we might approach this with that kind of TA kind of lens. But of course, even in that, how I might respond to a client, sharing this kind of a challenge might be quite different to how you would, even through using transactional analysis.
Yeah, we've both got really different styles. But I think one of the things that we both experienced with this client is there's so many things, that we could do with her. I mean, she's presenting, she tells us she's got difficulty in delegating. She's not very good at letting go. She finds it difficult to trust others. And actually, she's trained others to just throw stuff at her because they know it'll get it done.
Yeah.
And that's not just her superiors. She's trained her people to do that because she doesn't delegate very well. They know that if they throw stuff up to her, she'll do it. So I think the thing that was coming through for me when we were thinking about this avatar and clients like this, they're in a real danger of burning out. They feel like they're drowning.
Hugely, yeah. And often there's, I was just thinking what you were saying there about, taking on work that's kind of being thrown up at her by her people as well. Often the sort of thing I'll hear is a client who doesn't really want to put someone else out. So doesn't want them to work late, doesn't want them to work at the weekend, so they'll take it on themselves, which really speaks into that burning out point you've just made.
Yeah. And even they might say, like, how can I do this management stuff? It takes too much time. It's getting in the way of doing the real job, because they're thinking their job is to get stuff done rather than build the capacity of the team to get stuff done.
Yeah. And that really just makes me think there of a podcast episode we did, goodness knows, I can't remember when it was, but when we did the leadership pipeline, and we were just exploring how when you transition in terms of your role into a different level of seniority, there's shift that needs to occur. And that's very much where Alicia's at right now, right? In terms of that shifting transition point.
Shift in values. From a TA perspective, there's lots of drivers present. So you've got a really good way of describing drivers. Why don't you share that with our listeners?
As we grow up in our family of origin, in that system, any system, organisational family, will have its sort of unwritten rules around what you need to do to get on here, to survive, to be accepted, to be okay, to use kind of that language. And so within our family of origin, we learn what do we need to do to be okay. And so there are 5 drivers, 5 kind of types of behaviour we learn to be driven by in order to be successful.
Well, I think one of the easiest ways to do it is actually make it really practical and think about Alicia, you know. And like, first of all, she wants to do things right, you know. It has to be me because the others can't be trusted to do it well enough. So she's a bit of a perfectionist. So that would be the be perfect driver. So it's I'm okay if I can be perfect. So that's a rule that she's learned in her family of origin. And the thing is about drivers is they serve you really well. They're not bad things. They're actually good things. But when we just do them unconsciously, they can actually end up being counterproductive for us. So it's about bringing them into our awareness. One of the things about TA is you're exposing stuff to people, you're bringing it into their awareness so they can then choose to do something different about it. So she definitely presents with a be perfect driver in some of her stuff. Another one is she takes on huge challenges. And I would say nearly every single client we ever deal with, because of their seniority or whatever they're doing, they always have a try hard driver, which is I'm okay if I try hard. I take on big challenges, but going along on the level just is uncomfortable for them. They always want to be taken on a challenge. Would you agree with that? That nearly everybody we work with is a try hard driver?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
And it's been very, very useful for them. But if you put the combination of be perfect and try hard together, you will often get people getting into overwhelm until they learn some different ways to deal with things. Another one would be everything's got to be done yesterday. She's clearly got a hurry up driver. You know, you get evidence with people, sort of people that are always patting their lap, they're patting the keys in their pocket because there's always just a sense of urgency with them. So they've unconsciously got a hurry up driver. I'm okay if I hurry up. And the other two would be, again, using an example, she's really frightened of letting others down, isn't she?
Yeah, so she's really focused on pleasing others.
Yeah, and in fact, she's ended up wanting to please her team. But the thing is, her team should be pleasing her. But she's unconsciously in this behavior of just automatically wanting to please others. So again, bringing that into her awareness would be a good thing. And I think the final one is she struggles to ask for help. She struggles to show vulnerability. And that driver, therefore, is be strong. I'm okay if I can be strong. And this is, prevalent, I think, very much in Western society, that we don't want to show our vulnerability, and we know it's so important for leaders to be able to show that with their team so that their team can trust them.
So, of course, there's quite a few drivers. There's 5 drivers. In fact, there's a 6th, isn't there, that I think is sort of being kind of further researched. And rarely would you necessarily find a client who's kind of strongly demonstrating all of them, although they will all be there to some degree. And it's, I guess, where our interest is as coaches is often which are the strongest or which are the ones that are now being almost over pronounced and therefore potentially causing you some challenges as an adult.
Yeah. And I think every single one of her challenges in some way is a lot of it will often be that they're unconsciously using this driver where it's no longer appropriate. It's no longer being adaptive for them. It has been highly adaptive, but it's no longer adaptive in this situation when it's being used unconsciously. Again, it's always really important to think these are not bad things, these are really useful things. It's just whether or not they're happening automatically or they are actually, I'm saying, actually, I'm not going to do that. You're not going to do that here. So they've brought her to success to date, but and I think the thing as a coach is, if we were to go into teaching mode, and because coaching is not mentoring, you would just totally overwhelm somebody with all this knowledge.
Yes, and so the sort of thing that we might do is just be curious about whether we're seeing possible signs or indications of these drivers in the client's body language, in their behaviour, in the words that they're using, and just being curious about what kind of messages are we receiving, what might they be evoking in us, and kind of really trying to hold that objective stance and being curious about, how do I respond to that? What is my experience of this client in this moment? And almost develop it, not quite a hypothesis, that sounds scientific, but it's almost a bit of a working theory, if you like, about what might be some of the things that we're seeing.
So what might be useful is to just think how Alicia is presenting. So when we're in the coaching session, generally and quite often when people are presenting in Tryhard, because they're sharing the problem with us and they're talking about how difficult it is, they might even have their hand to the side of their head, or they might be talking in a strained voice, etc. So that's quite often a clue that somebody is in Tryhard. There's a little bit of strain to their voice because this is really difficult. They might say that it's a real difficult thing for me. So at that moment, they're using that adaptation. And you had a client you were telling me about recently.
Yeah. So just out of interest, I had a client recently who, again, tuning into my experience of this person, I just noticed that they were sort of shrinking. Their body seemed to get smaller. Sort of hunched forward, exactly. Sort of furrowed brow. As you say, very much sort of resting hand on head, like this is heavy. This is hard. This is a lot. And so that's what I tuned into. I just reflected that back, that's what I was noticing. And it felt very heavy. It felt, like it was hard work. And the other piece also that kind of intimated to me that this client was maybe in that kind of child ego state, going back to one of our previous podcast episodes with parent, adult, child egogram. I kind of tuned into, I felt a bit of frustration in myself, which indicates to me maybe she was in child that was inviting me into parent. And so again, and I know that rescue on the drama triangle is a very familiar place for me to be. So it's, as a coach, you have to really be tuned into all of this stuff. And there's a lot happening. Like there's a lot happening in the client. There's a lot happening in the space between you in terms of the relationship. And there's a lot happening in you yourself. And it's a lot to navigate as a coach. And it takes skill, it takes time, it takes practice. But yeah, it was very much about tuning into what was my kind of felt experience in that moment, and then using that as data and kind of offering that back to see how that landed. And it really, really landed and resonated with that client.
Yeah. So I think the key thing, and often you will get with clients who present in Tryhard, is easy to spin your wheels if you stay in the modality of thinking. Because we won't go into the detail of it, but thinking is the trapdoor for the Tryhard. And if you stay in wheel, you can find yourself spinning your wheels. And it's a real clue for a coach. If you suddenly find yourself spinning your wheels, that means you've fallen down that trapdoor of thinking with the client. They've pulled you down into that. And the key thing is not to stay in thinking, to change the modality. So you change the modality to reflect on your experience of her. I might go, I might be a humorist that says, you would make it light and not stay serious. So my style might be more, can I, I'd actually change my body language. Can I just reflect my experience of you right now? Because I'm getting out of that really concentrated furrowed brow mode. I'm lifting them out. And so that's one thing. But it's so easy with this client, with all these challenges, if we've got any rescuer in us at all, this client is going to really try and pull us into parent, is going to try and pull us into rescuer, because they're generally coming from victim. Yeah. And so we talked about the drama triangle, we talked about I'm okay, you're okay, parent, adult, child. We've essentially got somebody here presenting in Tryhard, but also it's really difficult. It's going to tempt us into rescuer. It's going to tempt us into parent. So that's what we really need to be present with this client.
And what's so interesting when that happens is the chances are, if that's what's happening in the dynamic between us in the coaching room, it's probably the dynamic that's happening between the client and, senior people in the organization. So it can be a mirror. And so again, bringing it back to Alicia, she wants to be promoted, she needs to be more visible. If the senior people, the senior stakeholders and decision makers, if their experience of her is similar to what we're experiencing in the coaching room, how useful is that going to be for her, given what she wants to achieve with her career?
And I think there's something else when we were talking about Alicia as an avatar and the sort of clients we might get this with these challenges. We're thinking her level of meaning making is an expert, and to use the LDP language, that means people at this level of meaning making, they want tools and techniques. They can actually be quite hard to coach, in the proper sense of coaching, because they really want practical tools and techniques. And I think the thing for a coach in this situation, it would be so easy to be drawn into their problems. And it's about, for me, with this sort of client, is about just keeping it really practical, one challenge at a time. But don't necessarily be afraid to use a tool like exposing the drama triangle. Said, let's apply this tool. Introduce the tool if you can then apply it immediately to their challenge. Yeah. And I think that's generally how I often deal with this type of client. They want the tips and techniques, so you introduce a tool, then they can apply that's going to increase their awareness and help them take responsibility for what's going on.
I think one of the other ways is really unpacking core beliefs and assumptions, because a big part of behavioural drivers, you use that great word rule. It's a rule that we've developed from a young age. Like, I must follow this rule, and I will be okay. And underneath that rule sits a whole heap of beliefs and assumptions that we kind of hold on to and don't challenge. And so starting to unpick that a little bit, what are you assuming here, or what are the beliefs, or can really start to loosen the grip it might have. And I guess if we think about something like kind of either the try hard driver or the being perfect driver, often, the kind of language I might use to describe that with a client would be they'd become very accustomed to collecting gold stars. So I'm showing my age a little bit here, but back at school, when I was at school, if I did a good piece of work, I get a gold star. Well done, Sarah, gold star. I'm ever so proud if you've got a gold star stuck on your workbook. It doesn't really happen anymore now; it's all digital. But you learn to collect gold stars. If I get a gold star, I feel good. I feel recognised, and it's all about the quality of my work. And so it's just about sort of you might be able to unpick that there's a belief that sits there that says I'm only good enough if someone else tells me I am.
I mean, the Be Perfect driver, I think, is really an interesting one, because you do come across that happening in this sort of client. And my reframe there is, what's more important to you? Is it more important to be perfect or to have high quality? Because what we know when we look at quality is actually you get better quality in a more agile sense of build, measure, learn, like not going beyond Pareto. And it's that idea of, well, okay, if I'm trying to do it perfectly, I'm going beyond Pareto. I'm taking all this effort on task A and I'm to get it to 95%, and task B, I'm managing to get it to 90%. And then task Z, I'm really struggling because I've had all this extra effort on task A and B. I'm really struggling to do class. So if I want to get it to at least Pareto, I'm going to exhaust myself. What happens if you take all of that effort beyond Pareto and apply it to these other things you've got to do? So that's one, that's an example of how you just use a little bit of reframing from what's more important, quality or being perfect. And often, most often, it's the quality that's more important. It's again that if you say yes to this, what are you saying no to? Time with my family or whatever. So reframes there's so many different coaching techniques you could use in these situations. The key thing with TA, I think, is for the coach not to get pulled into a rescue.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing I was just thinking about there with the kind of the reframe is it's also like a vision chairs exercise where you might just challenge the client. okay, so you have a choice here. You can carry on as you are. I mean, you've done it for however many years. I mean, we said Alicia was early 30s, so she's done it for 30 plus years, and it's worked very well for her, and she can carry on if she'd like to. What does that future look like? And she may well start to see that it's unsustainable, that she'll burn out, that she's exhausted, that she just cannot carry on like this. And so then you invite, okay, so what could you do? And that's really, again, a big part of what we're doing in TA is making the unconscious conscious, inviting the client to be more choiceful and intentional about when they allow that behavioural pattern, that driver to be in play, and when they might choose to make a different decision.
An example of it not really being a bad thing, if you think about please others, when you talk about a chairs exercise, one chairs exercise I sometimes do is to take the key stakeholders around and you put little cards on the table for each chair and say, okay, this stakeholder, what are their expectations of you? And to really bring that into their awareness. And actually, when you do that, it's often they might want you to stop pleasing your team and start pleasing yourself, or be more forthright and all the rest of it. So you can actually use that please others driver to support the things that they've got to change. So there's so many, every coach has got their own modalities. Like resistance to change model might be a really nice one here, because what I like about that model is you end up doing safe experiments. Just little things that will stay safe, because here's somebody who's in overwhelm or in near overwhelm. They don't want to do anything that's dangerous, so we want safe experiments.
I think the thing that's so powerful around, in terms of using transactional analysis is it does provide the client with a mirror, and it really does enable them to see how they are in the situation they're in, the role they're playing that's contributing to that, and the opportunity and the choice to do something different. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, and it requires practice. We don't have to take a switch and overnight everything changes, and that's not necessarily what we want to achieve anyway. But it's about putting things into practice. It's about reflection. It's about recognizing when we do trip up, inevitably we will. But that it's about starting to be choiceful and intentional. And I just think it's a really powerful way of clients being able to make a change when they're so kind of rooted in a particular way of being, and it's getting in their way from a career development perspective.
This may help people when we're talking about drivers. I use the analogy of like a computer system. It's like when you boot up a computer, the operating system, that's like our autonomic nervous system. We don't think about breathing and digestion and our circulation and how our liver works. That just happens. And then when we're doing our real thinking work, our strategy or whatever, we're using our medial prefrontal cortex. So that's like our applications like Excel and doing pivot tables and, complicated stuff we can do on a computer. But then when you boot up a computer, all these other programs run automatically that you're not really aware of, and they use up system resources, but you don't necessarily need them there, but they're just running automatically. Drivers are a bit like that. They're a bit like you've got your operating system, but these are things that run automatically that you're not aware of, and just bringing them into awareness just suddenly shines a light on all this stuff. And especially when they're triggered, we talked about being trigger aware. Sometimes they are triggered by just this type of person walking in the room. I will share this. I was working with this marketing director in this big IT firm, and I had never seen please others in this individual. I've never seen it as an adaptation. And then I was facilitating and helped facilitate this leadership program, and he was an attendee. And in walked the president of Europe. And this guy went total please others. His body language was please others. He said he cut across people to get the attention on him. He had a little false smile that that can indicate please others. And I'd never seen it before, and it had been triggered by the president of Europe walking into the room, and like there it was, and it was actually damaging to him because he lost a lot of reputational points with his peers when he did that because it was triggered. So that whole thing about drivers can be triggered by stimuli, and that's why I love that question. Is it's a full-time problem or a part-time problem? Because if it's a part-time problem, there would be a trigger. I'm sure we've talked about that before, but I thought that was just a really prime example of a driver can not be present a lot of the time, but be triggered by something in the environment.
So thank you so much for listening to the show. I hope you're really enjoying it. I'm loving it because I do just think transactional analysis is fascinating. So in our next episode, we're going to be sharing a new avatar called Adam, who is a marketing director. He's recently been promoted, and he's really struggling with delegation, with performance management. So do check in next time to learn a little more about how we might apply a TA approach to working with a client presenting with that kind of a challenge. As always, we really do appreciate your feedback. If there's anything you'd like us to explore, do get in touch and let us know. You can reach us at info@thecoachingquestion.com. And look out for our next episode. We look forward to speaking with you.
Bye.